The war chamber of the Kthari Dominion was carved from black stone and lit by floating orbs of pale green fire. It sat deep inside the capital city of Vornzal, on a world whose name no human tongue could say without breaking. For 11,000 years, this room had been the place where empires ended and new territories were born. The six-limbed reptilian lords of the Dominion had ruled 3 spiral arms of the galaxy from this chamber, and they had grown very used to winning. High Warlord Vex's Hall the Unbroken sat on his stone throne and looked down at the strategic council below him. His scales were the color of old copper, and his eyes were yellow slits that had not blinked in hours. Around him stood his admirals, his spies, and his war priests. On the floor of the chamber, a great holographic map glowed with the stars of the galaxy. One small blue-green dot pulsed at the edge of the display. "Show me the target," Vexjal said. The map shifted. The small blue dot grew larger until it filled the center of the chamber. It was a planet, a single, unremarkable planet, with one moon and a thin ring of tiny metal objects in orbit around it. "This is Sol 3, said the chief intelligence analyst, a tall Kthari named Drothkan. "The locals call it Earth. The species is called human. They are a tier, 7 primitive civilization." Vex's hail made a low sound in his throat. Tier 7 was almost not worth his time. Tier 7 species were barely past the point of killing each other with sticks. "Give me the report," he ordered. Drothkan nodded and began to speak. The humans, he explained, had only discovered space travel about 100 of their years ago. They had split the atom, yes, but they had not yet built a single city on another world. Their technology was crude. Their ships were slow. They had no energy shields, no plasma weapons, no gravitic drives. Their bodies were soft and weak. They had no claws, no armor plates, no venom, no extra limbs. They were, in every way that mattered to the Kthari, an embarrassment. "Subjugation time?" Vexjal asked. 18 cycles, High Warlord. Perhaps less. The humans fight among themselves constantly. They are divided into nearly 200 small tribes they call nations. We expect many of them will surrender to us just to spite their neighbors. The council laughed. It was a cold, clicking sound, like stones rattling in a jar. But one voice did not laugh. At the back of the chamber, a small, old Kthari with faded scales raised one of her 6 hands. Her name was Sarathi, and she was a xenobiologist. She had spent her whole long life studying the creatures of 1,000 worlds. She was not a warrior. She was not important. But she had read something in the human records that had kept her awake for many nights. "High Warlord," she said. "May I speak?" Vex's hail looked at her with mild annoyance. "Speak then. Quickly." Sarathi stepped forward. Her voice was thin, but steady. "The humans are a tier, 7 species by our measurements," she said. "That is true, but I have studied the history of their homeworld. I have looked at the creatures that lived beside them, and I have found something that troubles me greatly." "Go on," said the High Warlord. "Every species that shared the human homeworld with them is gone," Sarathi said. "Or nearly gone. Or changed beyond recognition. There were once 6 kinds of large predator on the main land masses of Earth. The humans killed 5 of them and tamed the 6th. There were once great herds of beasts that covered their plains for as far as the eye could see. The humans ate them, one by one, until only small numbers remained in protected zones. There were once other species of human, too. Different kinds. Cousins, you might say. The humans killed them all, or bred them out of existence, tens of thousands of their years ago. The chamber had grown very quiet. "That is the nature of predators," said Drothkan. "Every apex species does this. The Kthari did this on our own homeworld long ago." "Yes," said Sarathi. "But we did it with our claws and our venom and our great strength. The humans have none of these things. They did it with something else." "With what?" asked Vexjal. Sarathi paused. She seemed to be choosing her words with great care. "They did it by walking," she said. "They are what biologists call persistence hunters. Their bodies are built to move slowly, and for a very, very long time. When a human wants to kill a creature, it does not chase it and catch it. It follows it, for hours, for days. It follows the creature as the creature runs, and rests, and runs, and rests. And the human never stops. The human never rests. The human walks, and walks, and walks, until the creature cannot run anymore, until the creature lies down from exhaustion. And then the human walks up to it, quietly, and kills it. The chamber was silent. They have one of the most efficient cooling systems in the known galaxy, Cesarathi continued. Their bodies sweat. They can shed heat while they move. Most creatures must stop to cool themselves. Humans do not. They can run under the noon sun of their homeworld for hours without breaking down. No other intelligent species we have found can do this. Not one. And what of it? Said Drothkan. This is interesting, perhaps, for your studies, but it is not a threat to a battle fleet. Is-Sharathi turned her yellow eyes toward him. I am not telling you this as biology, she said. I am telling you this as a warning. A species that evolved to never, ever stop chasing its prey will not surrender when we defeat them in space. They will not stop when we take their cities. They will not stop when we kill half their population. They will follow us, for years, for generations, until they catch us, or we are dead. It is not a choice they make, it is what they are. Vex's Hall considered her words for a long moment. Then he made a dismissive gesture with two of his hands. Enough, he said. We have conquered creatures with claws longer than your whole body, old one. We have ended civilizations that spanned dozens of worlds. A species of soft, slow, weaponless walkers does not frighten me, no matter how far they walk. He turned to his scribe. Prepare the declaration of war. Send it to Earth through the diplomatic relay. Standard terms: unconditional surrender or total annihilation. Cesarathi bowed her head and said nothing more. She had done what she could. The wheels were turning now, and no one would stop them. The declaration was sealed and sent that same day. It reached Earth 72 hours later. In a quiet office in Geneva, a tired diplomat read the message twice. He laughed once, very softly. Then he picked up his communicator and called his superior. Within 3 days, every leader on Earth had seen the Cathari Declaration. They met. They talked. They argued. And then, they drafted a reply. The reply was 4 words long. It said, "Acknowledged, we accept. Begin." The Cathari Vanguard fleet dropped out of jump space at the edge of the Sol system, near the orbit of a cold gas giant the humans called Neptune. It was a grand fleet, the kind the Cathari used when they wanted to make a point. 400 warships of various sizes, led by the massive flagship Iron Triumph, which was as long as a small city and bristled with enough plasma lances to burn a continent to ash. Fleet Admiral Kroshvor stood on the bridge of the Iron Triumph and looked at the holographic display of the system ahead of him. He was in a good mood. He had been promised a quick campaign and a swift promotion. His wife expected him home in time for the hatching of their 7th brood. He smiled, in the way that Cathari smile, which is to say, he showed a great many sharp teeth. "Scan the system," he ordered. "Find me the human home fleet. I want to know how quickly they will run." The sensor officer worked in silence for several minutes. Then he looked up, and his scales had gone a strange gray color. "Admiral," he said, "the humans are not running. Then they are hiding." "No, Admiral, they are waiting." Kroshvor stepped closer to the display. The image sharpened, and he saw what his sensor officer had seen. The humans had deployed their entire space-capable fleet in a long, thin line across the outer system. They had not pulled back to defend their homeworld. They had not evacuated their colonies on the red planet Mars, or on the moons of Jupiter, or in the mining stations of the outer belt. They were all simply there, in position, as if they had been waiting for this day for a very long time. "Curious," said Kroshvor. "They have misjudged their position badly. We will teach them what a fleet looks like. Order the forward cruisers to attack the nearest human formation. Light resistance. Test their defenses. Then we crush them in a full sweep." The order went out. 60 Cathari cruisers broke formation and moved forward at high speed, their plasma lances charged and their shields glowing blue-white. The humans did not wait. Before the Cathari cruisers were even in standard weapons range, The human ships opened fire, but not with anything the Cathari had expected. The humans did not use plasma. They did not use beam weapons. They fired solid metal. They fired long, thin rods of a very heavy metal called tungsten. These rods were not exploded out of their ships by chemical rockets, the way the Cathari records suggested primitive species did such things. The humans had built great magnetic rails, longer than most of their own ships, and they had used these rails to accelerate the tungsten rods to nearly the speed of light. The first volley hit the Cathari cruisers. The energy shields the Cathari were so proud of, the shields that had defended their empire for thousands of years, were designed to stop plasma and beam weapons. They were not designed to stop solid matter moving at relativistic speeds. The tungsten rods passed through the shields as if the shields were not there. They passed through the hulls of the cruisers. They passed through the crew. They passed through the engine cores. They came out the other side and kept going, because nothing in the universe had enough time to stop them. In 6 seconds, the Cathari forward group lost 22 cruisers. "Fire back!" Kroshvor shouted. "All batteries, fire!" The Cathari fleet fired. Plasma lances cut through the black of space. Beam weapons cooked the void. The human ships were hit, and some were damaged, and a few were destroyed. But the humans had spread their fleet across a very wide area, and they had given each ship its own targeting solution. They did not clump together the way proper fleets did. They moved like a school of small fish, each one thinking for itself, each one hard to hit. And the humans kept firing those tungsten rods. By the end of the first hour, the Cathari vanguard had lost 120 ships. By the end of the third hour, they had lost 200. By the end of the 6th hour, Admiral Kroshvor ordered a retreat to the outer edge of the system. 43% of his vanguard was gone. The humans had lost less than 30 ships. In the quiet of his ready room, Kroshvor stared at the reports and tried to understand what had happened. It was not possible. A tier, 7 species did not do this. A tier, 7 species ran. A tier, 7 species begged. A tier, 7 species did not build weapons that ignored 10,000 years of Cathari shield technology. He ordered a different kind of attack. If they could not fight the humans in open space, they would board them. A Cathari boarding team, armored and armed with plasma blades, was considered among the most dangerous close combat forces in the galaxy. A single Cathari warrior could, in theory, kill dozens of soft-bodied humans before being overcome. 3 days later, a Cathari strike force managed to get close to a damaged human frigate. They matched velocity, breached the hull, and poured inside. The boarding team never reported back. When the Cathari fleet moved in to recover the frigate an hour later, the frigate was gone. The humans had rigged it to explode. They had waited until the Cathari were fully aboard, and then they had detonated the fusion core. The explosion took the human frigate, the Cathari boarding team, a nearby Cathari destroyer, and 2 supply tenders with it. Kroshvor read the report of the incident 3 times. Then he called his intelligence officer to his ready room. "Bring me the files on the humans," he said. "All of them. I want to know what we are really fighting." For the next several hours, Kroshvor read. He read about a species that had spent most of its history at war with itself. He read about a period the humans called the First World War, in which young humans had lived for years in muddy trenches, being shelled and poisoned and shot at, and had still gone forward when ordered to go forward. He read about the Second World War, in which the humans had killed tens of millions of their own kind and then ended the whole thing with 2 atomic bombs. He read about a thing called the Pacific Theater, in which small groups of humans had held small islands against overwhelming forces, sometimes to the last soldier. He read about human children's stories, about the games human young played, about the songs human soldiers sang before battle. He read, and read, and read, and slowly his scales went from copper to a pale, sick gray. Meanwhile, back on the Cathari homeworld, in the great stone chamber, Sarathi had finally been granted a new audience with the High Warlord. She did not gloat. She did not say, "I told you so." She simply put the reports on the stone table in front of Vex's Jal and let him read them. When he was done, he looked at her with something new in his eyes. Not quite fear. The Cathari did not feel fear, but something close to it. "Explain to me," he said. What we have done. Cesarathy folded two of her hands together. You declared war, she said quietly, on the only species in the galactic record that treats warfare as something close to a hobby. A species that invented peace only as a short rest between wars. A species whose greatest stories, passed down for thousands of years, are almost all about battles and soldiers and clever killers. She paused. And now, High Warlord, they are walking toward us, and they will not stop. The Cathari had always believed that technology moved slowly. A species developed a new weapon every few centuries. Shields improved by small amounts over generations. Engine designs were refined across many lifetimes. This was the natural way of things. The galaxy was old, and its rules were settled. The humans had not read these rules. Within 3 months of the opening battle at Neptune, human engineers had already begun to take apart the wreckage of Cathari ships. They pulled shield generators from shattered hulls and studied them in orbital labs. They traced the paths of plasma conduits. They copied the math of gravitic drives. They argued with each other, and drew on screens, and built small models of things that did not yet exist. And then, very quickly, they began to build full-sized versions. The first human warships of the new design left the shipyards of Luna and Mars in the 4th month of the war. They looked nothing like the Cathari ships they had borrowed from, because the humans did not build things the way the Cathari built things. The Cathari built ships to look powerful. The humans built ships to work. Their new vessels were ugly, boxy, and covered in strange bulges, where the captured shield generators had been bolted to the existing hulls. But they worked. The new human ships carried kinetic railguns, as before. But now, the tungsten rods were wrapped in a thin sheath of plasma, stolen from Cathari Lance technology. When these new rounds hit a target, they punched through like the old rods had done, but they also burned as they passed, leaving behind tracks of melted metal and cooked electronics. A single hit could now kill a Cathari destroyer. 2 hits could kill a cruiser. The human fusion drives were augmented with small gravitic manipulators taken from captured Cathari engines. This did not make the humans as fast as the Cathari. It only closed the gap by half. But it was enough. Enough to chase. Enough to catch. And then, in the 5th month of the war, something happened that the Cathari Admiralty had declared to be impossible. A human strike team captured a Cathari light cruiser, intact, not disabled, not wrecked, whole. The cruiser was the Bright Fang, under the command of Captain Vosrin. She had been patrolling a trade lane near the asteroid belt when her ship received a distress call. A Cathari merchant vessel, badly damaged, begging for help. Vosrin closed with the merchant to offer aid. The merchant vessel was not a merchant vessel. It was a human ship, painted and disguised, and broadcasting a copied Cathari distress signal. The humans boarded the Bright Fang before the Cathari crew even understood what was happening. The Cathari forensic teams who later reviewed the ship's logs would not discuss what had been found inside on open channels. Some of them refused to discuss it at all. The Cathari crew had been killed, but the manner of it was, the teams reported quietly, unusual. The humans had not simply used guns. They had used knives. They had used their hands. In one corridor, a Cathari warrior 3 times the size of a human had been killed with what appeared to be a length of pipe. The humans flew the Bright Fang back to a hidden shipyard in the outer system. 6 weeks later, the first human interstellar strike fleet left Sol, using a copy of the cruiser's jump drive in every ship. The war stopped being about Earth. It became, very quickly, an invasion of Cathari space. The humans arrived at Cathari colony worlds without warning. They jumped in, fired their kinetic weapons, destroyed orbital defenses, and then did something that the Cathari command found almost more disturbing than the attacks themselves. They landed. Cathari doctrine had always held that orbital supremacy was the deciding factor in a planetary conflict. A fleet in orbit controlled the planet below. The humans did not seem to believe this. They landed ground troops on Cathari worlds. These troops were not large armies. They were small teams, a few hundred strong, heavily armed, and strangely equipped. They moved fast. They destroyed key targets. They left before Cathari reinforcements could arrive. These teams did things that no Cathari had ever seen done in warfare. They lied. They lied constantly, and in ways the Cathari minds could not follow. A Cathari garrison on the colony world of Cathinvor received a supply convoy late in the first year of the war. The convoy carried the standard markings, used the standard codes, and flew the standard formation. The Cathari dock crews waved them in. The convoy docked at the main supply station and began to unload. For 9 full weeks, this supply convoy operated normally. Its crews ate in the Cathari mess halls. Its officers attended Cathari strategy meetings. It delivered real supplies, in real quantities, from real Cathari worlds. On the 70th day, every ship in the convoy exploded at the same time, in the center of the main shipyard of Cathinvor. The shipyard was destroyed. 60% of the Cathari fleet stationed at that world was destroyed. The explosions were so large that they could be seen from the planet's surface. The entire convoy had been human, from the first day. Nobody in the Cathari Admiralty could explain how the humans had passed the identity checks, how they had fooled the dock crews, how they had sat in meetings, in Cathari uniforms, wearing Cathari faces somehow, for 9 weeks, without a single one of them being caught. The humans had captured Cathari crews and forced them to train the infiltrators, the intelligence services guessed. Or perhaps the humans had simply learned Cathari customs so well that they could fake them. Nobody knew. The Cathari had no defense against this kind of warfare. The Cathari had evolved as the unchallenged top predator of their homeworld. They had never needed to lie to another thinking creature about their identity. They could not think of the idea. When their own spies infiltrated enemy societies, the spies were always Cathari pretending to be different kinds of Cathari, from different regions or clans. The idea of pretending to be a different species, of wearing a different face for weeks on end, was not something their minds easily reached. The humans, it turned out, had been doing exactly this kind of thing to each other for tens of thousands of years. In the stone chamber of Vornzal, Caesarathi was now serving as chief strategic advisor to the High Warlord. It was not a promotion she had wanted. Most of her former superiors were dead. Some had been killed in battle. Several had performed ritual suicide after major defeats, as was the old Cathari custom. The survivors had been demoted or sent to quiet posts far from the war. She stood before Vex's Zhao the Unbroken, who no longer looked quite so unbroken. His scales had faded. His eyes were tired. His great crown of ceremonial spines had been set aside weeks ago. "I do not understand them," he said to her one evening. "Explain them to me again. Why do they fight this way? Why do they lie? Why do they wear our faces? Where did they learn these things?" Caesarathi considered her answer. "High Warlord," she said, "the humans evolved alongside other intelligent predators. There were great cats on their homeworld, and wolves, and other kinds of human. They hunted these creatures, and these creatures hunted them. And they all had to outthink each other, constantly, for hundreds of thousands of years." She paused. "The humans developed a way of thinking that we do not have. They can imagine what is inside another mind. They can guess what the other mind is thinking, and then they can imagine the other mind guessing what they are thinking, and then they can guess what the other mind will do based on that. They call this, in their own languages, theory of mind. It is the foundation of their whole way of war." "And we cannot do this?" asked Vex's Jal. "We can, High Warlord, a little, but we are poor at it compared to them. We never needed this skill. Nothing on our homeworld was ever smart enough to lie to us. The humans had to lie to survive. So they became very, very good at it. And now they are lying to us, and we cannot even tell when they are doing it." Vex's hull was silent for a long time. "How do we win?" he asked. Sharathi did not answer. She did not know. By the second year of the war, the galaxy had stopped laughing. Other species had watched the conflict from a careful distance. Most of them had expected the humans to be crushed within a few months. This was the normal pattern. A young species offended the Cathari. The Cathari fleets arrived. The young species surrendered, or was broken, and the galaxy moved on. Everyone knew how it went. This time, it did not go that way. By the end of the second year, The Cathari had lost 14 star systems. They had lost 3 of their main shipbuilding worlds. They had lost an estimated 60% of their warriors of fighting age. Their economy was shrinking. Their colony governors were sending frantic messages to Vornzal, begging for reinforcements that did not come. And the humans were still moving forward. Slowly, carefully, one system at a time. Never rushing, never stopping. The smaller species of the galaxy began to notice. The consortium of free worlds was a loose group of minor species who had banded together centuries ago, mostly for trade. They were not a military power. They stayed quiet and small on purpose, because the Cathari tended to eat any group that grew too ambitious. The consortium had watched the war with careful interest. At first, they had expected nothing. Now, they began to wonder. A delegation from the Fenri, a tall and graceful avian species, was the first to make contact with the humans. The Fenri had once been a free people, with their own worlds and their own songs and their own ancient cities. 600 years ago, the Cathari had conquered them. The Fenri had been used as laborers and servants ever since. They had kept their language and their memories, but they had been broken, and they knew it. A small group of Fenri elders, with great risk to themselves, smuggled a message out through trade contacts. The message reached the consortium, which passed it to the humans. The message said, simply, "We would speak with you, if you will speak with us." A meeting was arranged on a neutral asteroid station at the edge of Cathari space. The Fenri delegation arrived first. They were nervous. They had prepared a long speech of submission, because they assumed that humans, being a rising power, would want tribute. This was how the galaxy worked. The human delegation arrived in a single small shuttle. Out of the shuttle stepped 6 humans. 4 of them were soldiers, and they carried weapons, but they kept the weapons low and did not point them at anyone. The other 2 were a man and a woman in plain uniforms. The woman was old, with gray hair cut short, and her face was dark and deeply lined. She walked with a small limp. Her name was General Elena Okonkwo. The lead Fenri elder, a tall silver-feathered being named Kasiri, began the speech of submission. She spoke of how the Fenri had little to offer. She spoke of how they would serve. She spoke of how they hoped only for mercy. General Okonkwo listened, politely, for about 30 seconds. Then she raised one hand. "Please stop," she said. Her voice was quiet. "I don't want a speech like that. I don't want you to tell me what you'll give up. I want you to tell me what you need." Kasiri was silent for a long moment. Her feathers shifted in confusion. She had never heard a sentence like that before. Not from any major power. In her 600 years of memory, no one had ever asked the Fenri what they needed. What do you want from us then?" she asked. Okonkwo thought about it. "Nothing you don't want to give," she said. "If you want to fight with us, we'll take fighters. If you want to work with us, we'll share plans. If you want nothing at all, you can go home, and we won't come looking for you. We're not the Cathari." Kasiri stared at her. "You are asking us," she said slowly, "to be your equals." "I'm asking you to be our friends," said Okonkwo. "If you want to be. Equal is a starting point." The Fenri did not return home. They joined the human effort that same week. Word of the meeting spread quickly. The consortium of free worlds sent their own delegation within a month. Then came the Droshan, a slow and thoughtful aquatic species. Then the Velmara, the Chikatan, the Onovo, and a dozen smaller groups. Each one came expecting to be used as tools. Each one found, instead, that the humans treated them as equals. The humans had a gift for this work, and the Cathari never understood it. The human ambassadors learned alien names correctly, and said them without complaint. They learned alien customs. They ate alien food, even when the food made them sick, and they did not make faces or complain. They went to alien funerals when Allied soldiers died, and they wept real tears. They remembered the hatching days of alien children. They told jokes. They made other species laugh. In the Cathari war room, these reports were read with growing horror. "They are winning the smaller species without firing a shot," said Cesarathi one evening to the High Warlord. "Every world we have oppressed, Every species we have broken is rising against us. Not because the humans forced them to, because the humans asked them nicely. How is this possible? Said Vexjal. Kindness is not a weapon. On their world it is, said Sarathi. Humans are social creatures. They live in very large groups. They have always needed to cooperate, or die. They have become, over the long ages, the best creatures in the galaxy at making other creatures want to help them. They do this without even thinking about it. A human ambassador does not plan to win hearts. The human ambassador simply is a human ambassador, and the hearts follow. Vex's Hal struck the stone of his throne with one clawed hand. Then we must break them, he said. We must use something they cannot defend against. Sarathi, you have studied their biology. You know their weaknesses. Design me a plague, a disease, tailored to their bodies, that will sweep their homeworld and end this war in a season. Sarathi went very still. High Warlord, she said carefully. This would be against the oldest laws of war. No species has used a bioweapon in this galaxy for 8,000 years. The humans have broken every other rule, said Vexjal. We will break this one. The project was authorized. A secret research facility was established on a small moon, far from the main battle lines. 40 of the Dominion's best bioengineers were brought there. They began work on a disease designed to kill humans, and only humans. The facility existed for 40 hours. On the 41st hour, a human strike team hit the facility from 3 sides at once. Their ships bypassed every sensor net. Their soldiers wore human-made stealth gear that the Cathari had not even known was possible. They killed the guards. They killed the scientists. They destroyed every sample of the disease. They set fire to every research note and every data storage unit. Before they left, they painted a message on the wall of the main laboratory, in perfect Cathari script. The message said, "We know what you tried to do. Do not try it again." Nobody in the Cathari intelligence services could explain how the humans had learned of the facility. It had been built in total secrecy. The scientists had been transported there in unmarked ships. The moon was not on any star chart, but the humans had known. Somehow, the humans always knew. In the stone chamber of Vornzal, Vexjal the Unbroken sat alone and looked at the message, which had been photographed and sent to him by the survivors of the strike. He read it many times. Slowly, an understanding came to him. He had not been fighting a species of soft walkers, as he had thought at the start. He had not been fighting warriors, as he had come to believe in the middle. He had been fighting something older and stranger than either. He had been fighting a species that had spent its whole history learning how to outthink every other thinking thing it had ever met. And they had outthought him. Completely. He was very tired now. He had been fighting for 3 long years. He had lost many children. He had lost most of his fleet. He had lost the faith of his colonies. He had lost, he realized, the war itself. Sarathi, he called out, softly. The old xenobiologist came forward. Yes, High Warlord? Send a message to the humans, he said. Tell them I wish to talk. Tell them I wish to end this. Sarathi bowed her head. Yes, High Warlord. I will send the message. And she did. In the 4th year of the war, the Cathari capital system itself came under blockade. Human ships arrived at the edge of the Vornzal system in great numbers. They did not attack the homeworld. They did not bombard the cities. They simply took positions at every jump point, and they cut off all trade, all supply, and all movement in and out. It was the kind of blockade that, given enough time, would starve the Cathari homeworld into submission. But the humans did not want to starve anyone. High Warlord Vex's Hal sent his message of peace through a Fenri intermediary. The message was received by the humans within a day. The reply came back within another day, which was unusually fast by the slow standards of galactic diplomacy. The reply said, "We will meet. Name a place." A neutral station was chosen, far from any occupied world. The Cathari delegation traveled there in a small, unarmed vessel. Vex's Hal went in person. His advisors had begged him to send a lower-ranking officer, for his own safety. But he had shaken his head. He had started this war. He would end it himself. Sarathi went with him. The humans were already at the station when the Cathari arrived. General Elena Okonkwo led the human delegation. She had aged in the years of the war. Her hair was fully white now, and her limp was worse. But her eyes were the same steady brown they had always been. The two delegations met in a small, plain room, with a single stone table between them. Vex's Zhal sat on one side. Okonkwo sat on the other. "I have come to surrender," Vex Zhal said. Through a translator, Okonkwo shook her head. "I don't want to surrender," she said. "I want a peace." Vex's Zhal did not understand the difference at first. Among the Cathari, there was no difference. A defeated enemy surrendered. The victor took what it wanted. That was how the galaxy worked. Okonkwo, seeing his confusion, tried to explain. "The humans," she said, "had come to the table with a list of demands. But the demands were not what the Cathari expected. There would be no territorial losses. The Cathari would keep their homeworld. They would keep their core systems. They would keep the worlds they had built themselves, as long as those worlds had Cathari populations living on them willingly. There would be no reparations in gold or goods. The only thing the Cathari had to return were the enslaved populations of other species, which would be freed and given the choice to go home or remain where they were as free citizens. There would be no war crimes tribunals for ordinary soldiers, for admirals, or even for most generals. Only the highest leaders, those who had ordered specific atrocities, would face trial, and those trials would be fair. The humans would provide defense counsel themselves. The Cathari government would remain a Cathari government. The humans would not install puppets. The humans would not choose new leaders. The Cathari people would choose their own way forward, subject only to certain constitutional reforms that the Cathari would draft themselves, with human input only as advisors. Vex's Hal listened to all of this in silence. When Okonkwo was finished, he sat still for a long time. "I do not understand," he said finally. "We declared war on you. We tried to use a plague against you. We killed many of your people. You had us in the palm of your hand. Why would you not crush us?" Okonkwo considered the question. "There is one demand," she said. "One that is not negotiable. Name it. The Cathari will join a new galactic compact, a compact of peace. It will be a place where all species, large and small, have a voice. No species in the compact will be allowed to wage wars of conquest against another. If a member breaks this rule, all other members will join together to stop them." Vex's Hal nodded slowly. "And humanity will lead this compact?" "No," said Okonkwo. "Humanity will be one vote among many, the same as the Fenri, the same as the Droshan, the same as the Cathari, once you have joined." Vex's Jal stared at her. "You fought us for 4 years," he said slowly. "You beat us in every system. You broke our fleets. You outthought our spies. You have the whole of our homeworld at your mercy. And you are asking for one vote?" "One vote," said Okonkwo. "And a promise to stop conquering people." "Why?" asked Vex's Jal. His voice was quiet. "Why this, and not more?" Okonkwo looked at him for a long time. She was, he realized, thinking about how to answer. She was not performing. She was trying to say something true. "We have fought a lot of wars," she said at last. "More than you know. Most of our history is war, fighting each other, on our own little world. And we learned something, slowly. We learned it at terrible cost. We learned that when you beat an enemy and then grind them into dust, you do not create peace. You create the next war. The children of the defeated grow up hungry and angry, and they come back for you in 30 years, or 50 years, or 100. We have seen this pattern over and over on our world. We have buried tens of millions of our own because of it." She paused. "So we stopped doing it," she said. "Not all at once, not perfectly, but we stopped. We learned that the only war worth winning is the one that ends in a peace the defeated can live with. A peace your former enemy can grow old inside. A peace where their grandchildren have no reason to hate you." Vex's Jal lowered his head. He did not know what to say. "We are not being kind, High Warlord," Okonkwo added. "Let me be clear about that. We are being practical. Every species we have shown mercy to has become our friend. Every species the Cathari have crushed has become our ally against you. Mercy is a better weapon than cruelty. We learned this the hard way, many times over. Now we are teaching it to you. M. The peace was signed 3 weeks later. It was called the Compact of Stars, and it was the first true galactic government in the known history of this part of space. The Cathari joined, so did the Fenri, so did the Consortium of Free Worlds, and the Droshan, and the Velmara, and the Chikotan, and the Onovo, and dozens of others. Humanity joined as one voting member, not more, not less. Cesarathi was named the first Cathari ambassador to the Compact. She was, at this point, very old, but she accepted the duty. She sat beside General Okonkwo at the opening ceremony of the Compact's first session. The session was held on a neutral station, built for the purpose, with one chamber large enough to hold representatives from every member species. During a quiet moment in the ceremony, Cesarathi leaned toward the general. "I must ask you one last time," she said. "Why did you not destroy us? Every other species in the galaxy would have." Okonkwo smiled a small, sad smile. "Because we know how that story ends," she said, "and we are tired of reading it." The generations that followed saw a galaxy unlike any it had been before. Old enemies learned to trade. Old slaves became citizens. Old empires became republics. There were still disagreements, of course. There were still crimes. There were still small conflicts that had to be settled. But there were no more wars of conquest. The Compact held. Many generations later, a Cathari historian named Drethan Vra wrote the definitive history of the war. She worked on it for most of her long life, and when it was finished, it filled 7 large volumes. She ended her work with a single passage that would become famous throughout the galaxy. She wrote, "The humans were not the most powerful species we ever encountered. They were not the most advanced. They were not the most numerous. They were simply the first species we ever met who had already made every mistake we were about to make, and who were willing to teach us, at gunpoint if necessary, not to make them ourselves." Above the entrance to the Compact's headquarters, carved in the languages of every member species, was a line of text. It was a translation of the 4-word reply that Earth had sent, many years earlier, to a foolish declaration of war. It said, "Acknowledged. We accept. Begin." And the galaxy, at last, was at peace.